am I supposed to believe anything that comes out of your mouth? I don't even know your first name, for Christ's sakes.
The last thing that I wanted to do was hurt anybody.
The film begins with a terrified woman, barefoot and covered in blood, running to an elderly neighbor's house for shelter, and she lets her in. In the next scene, it's a rainy night in Boston and the same girl, now with blonde hair and a hoodie, is trying to catch the bus. The police are after her, and she has no time but gets on just before the doors are closed. A policeman, showing his badge, stops 2 buses in a row without managing to find this mysterious lady. The bus leaves to Atlanta. The mysterious woman travels for many hours, and during this time she is either sleeping or gazing out the window. After the long and rainy journey, the bus makes a quick stop at Southport, a small city on the north. She is going to a small store on the port to get a coffee where she meets Alex for the first time. She doesn't speak much but smiles at least. She decides to stay here. When it gets dark, she puts all her stuff in a bag and goes under a bridge in order to get some sleep. Poor thing. The following day she visits again the port area and asks a local lady if she can work as a waitress at her store. She says she has some experience and gets the job. After that, we see her looking at her new house, a cabin in the woods, where the owner is explaining all the different rooms. She starts renting the house, but when the night falls and she is sleeping in her new bed, she heard some noise and wakes up. She goes to the kitchen and realizes that it's just an open window. As she is trying to close the window, she stumbles and accidentally breaks the floor. She is trying to get her foot off the hole as she sees a tail of a rat. Not the best first night. The next day, she heads to Alex's store in order to get some stuff to paint the floor. There she meets Alex's daughter, named Lexi, who is a sweet girl that proposes she colors her floor yellow. There Katie introduces herself to the little girl, and then her father comes. While Alex and Katie talks and flirt a little, Lexi brings her the color palette and she pays for her things. Katie is working at the restaurant on the port when 2 policemen come into the place. She gets really anxious and heads to the kitchen area, trying not to show her fear. The policemen are asking about a Honda car, and when their delivery is ready, Katie gives them their package without any further problem. Katie, after finishing her job, goes back home when she sees Jo, a strange lady, looking through her property and gazing through the windows. Jo is trying to explain herself, telling Katie that she never had any neighbors before. She tells her that she is at Kate's disposal if she needs anything. At Boston, Kevin, the cop who was after Katie, tries to get all the pieces of information from the employee at the bus station, with no further result. This is because the bus that Katie picked was headed to the central station of Atlanta, and there's many routes in Atlanta. Kevin is sitting at his office at the police station, thinking what else he can do, while he is looking at the printed photo of Katie. Why is he so determined to find her? Katie heads to Alex's store, and she stops and talks with Lexi, who is painting a flying fish. Katie is making her final order about the colors of the floor, which are going to be yellow, and Alex says that they will have them on Monday. Alex asks for her name, and she introduces herself as Katie. Alex introduces himself and Roger, his assistant too. Alex's son is fishing at the deck, while he is aggressively staring at her. Katie leaves the store and heads to her house along with Jo, and they have a small conversation. Meanwhile, Kevin, holding a photo of the barefoot brown-haired lady, knocks on people's doors asking for pieces of information. He is speaking to the elderly lady who saved Katie, and she pretends she has never seen her before. Good job, lady. At Southport, Katie is working and talking with Maddie, who tells her the sad story of Alex, whose wife passed away due to cancer 4 years ago. You can see that Katie is feeling sad for the poor guy. It's Monday, and when the cans of paints are at the store, Alex helps drop Katie out of the house, but she doesn't let him inside. I still feel like there's a connection building up between the two. After that, Katie starts to paint the floor. The days are passing by, and she enjoys the company of Jo. After this scene, a flashback is showing the brown-haired lady covered in blood, dropping a knife on the floor and grabbing some clothes in order to escape. A man is laying on the floor and she gets over him and leaves the house immediately. Oh no, Katie, what did you do? Kate wakes up because of some car lights and goes into the living room, staring at the door, and eventually steps on wet paint. The car leaves shortly after. It's the next day, and when she leaves the house, she finds a bicycle and goes to Alex, who left her the bike last night. They have a conversation about boundaries and the facts that she does not like people sneaking into her property. Later that night, Joe is calling Katie and tell her to keep the bike, and she agrees. The following day, she is visiting Alex in order to thank him, but he is a little bit upset about her behavior. Katie sees Josh, Alex's son, slip on the boat, hitting his head. Alex jumps in the sea to save him while Katie is holding Lexi, who is crying about her brother. Finally, he brings him up from the sea, but Josh is angry at his dad and leaves instantly. Kevin is still looking for evidence in Boston and cannot find any single clue, and he decides to send a photo of this lady to all the departments as a first-degree murder suspect. So we find out she's wanted for murder. Alex is planning to take the kids to the beach, and Lexi persuades Katie, who is passing by, to go with them. They all go to the beach, and Josh is not so happy about it. Alex wants to take a lot of photos, and Josh is making faces in order to ruin the moment. After Josh catches a fish, his father wants to take a picture, and they have an argument about photos because Josh doesn't like pictures, possibly due to his missing mom. While Kevin is bothering the neighbors again, Katie is learning with Maddie how to fish at night. She finally catches a fish, which she gives to Alex as a gift. Then he asks her to go for a ride with him on a canoe. After that, Alex leaves his house with all the things they need for canoeing, even though Jerry tells them it is going to rain. Alex and Katie are getting into the canoe and start their ride, discussing his wife's loss and how he manages to make it through. As predicted, it starts raining and they head to his clothes store in order to grab a bite. Here, they start dancing in the dark. They look pretty cute together. They end up hugging and laughing, and they are ready to kiss when the police are flashing in the store, which terrifies her. We find out that Alex's friend Jerry is actually a police officer, and he takes them back to Katie's place to drop her off, and after they get off the car, Alex grabs her and kisses her passionately. This is what we've been waiting for. When Alex goes back home, Lexi is mad at him for being late, but they talk a little before he kisses her goodnight. At night, Alex leaves the house and is going to his house across the yard. He opens a wardrobe and reads the envelopes that are in there. The first one was for Josh's graduation day, the second one for Lexi's wedding, and so on. Alex is disturbed by his son, who is yelling at him not to enter Mom's area and to leave it alone. What a sad story. They all must miss her very much. Meanwhile, Kevin enters an abandoned apartment and finds a bottle of vodka and finally drinks a shot. Flashback, the brown-haired lady is cutting her hair and her neighbor is helping her to escape. The following day, Katie calls her and tells her that everything is all right. Kevin, who slept at the apartment, finds a note and realizes that the two ladies are communicating via the post office. He goes across the street, telling the neighbor that he found the letters in the post box. Katie is at work and Alex visits her only to kiss her. After work, they meet up for a meal. They are growing closer to each other, and that night they end up making passionate love at her place. The next morning, Alex is visiting his friends at the police department when he sees the photo of Katie as a suspect. She tries to explain with no result, and he leaves the restaurant. Kevin at the same time is accused of falsely accusing Katie of first-degree murder and drinking at the job, so he gets suspended. Now it's starting to get juicy. Flashback again, and the brown-haired lady is eating with Kevin, who drinks a lot, and all of a sudden, he breaks all the dishes. He pulls her hair and hits her. She takes a knife and tries to avoid him. He is trying to choke her, and then she stabs him with the knife, trying to get away. So that is why Kevin is after Katie. She was his wife. Katie goes back home, takes all her stuff while Joe is trying to convince her not to leave. Alex, who is heading to her house, finds out that she is gone and goes to the port. There she explains to him that her real name is Erin and that she tried to escape away from her abusive and alcoholic husband, who happens to be a cop, so no one can help them. Alex promises to help her, and she decides to not take the ferry. Kevin sneaks into the neighbor's house and listens to a message that Katie sent, saying she is all right, and he finds the place where she lives through the phone number. He is headed to Southport to find her. He arrives there in the morning and goes to Alex's store, talks to little Lexi, and shows her a picture of Erin. She says she does not know this lady and he leaves. Later that evening, the local parade is taking place in the heart of the city, and Kevin is looking for Erin, totally drunk. He goes to the restaurant, where a party is taking place, and he finally sees her. He is devastated and doesn't know what to do. Meanwhile, Joe is staring at everyone. Later that night, Alex is leaving Erin and the kids at home, and he is headed to the port because there is a firework tradition taking place there. Katie is looking at the spectacular fireworks, and all of a sudden Joe appears and tells her that Kevin is here. He is trying to convince her to come back, and when she refuses, he pours gas on all of the house, but Erin manages to persuade him not to start a fire. She is hugging him and then throws him into the water, but the fire catches on from the fireworks. Lexi is sleeping upstairs, and when Alex realizes that his house is on fire, he goes to save the little girl. They manage to get to the burning roof while Erin is fighting with Kevin, who has a gun. A gunshot goes off, and they realize that he is dead. Alex is holding his daughter and goes to Erin, who hugs Lexi. It's finally over. The next day, the house was totally burnt, but Alex finds his wife's envelopes in a photo. Josh is crying because he missed his mom's memories, and they hug tight. The following morning, Erin meets up with Joe, who announces to her that it is time for her to leave, and that Erin belongs to this place. After that, Erin visits Alex, who gives her an envelope which says, "To her," on the outside. She starts reading it, and it is a letter of his late wife, saying that she is the one that is going to be with her family from now on, asking her to love her husband and kids. There is also a photo in the envelope with his late wife. It is Joe. Katie realizes that her neighbor Joe was the ghost of his late wife, watching over them. Love hurts. There is nothing as painful as heartbreak. But in order to learn to love again, you must learn to trust again. I've watched this movie many times and love how well made it was. The story is very touching. The entire movie flowed perfectly to me, and the end gets me every time. Worth the watch over and over again. I would recommend it to all drama lovers. Please don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe. Comment below what you want to see us work on next.